now?
Yep. You want to give everybody just a little bit of background just so that
sure.
they know who you are?
So I'm a veterinarian. I'm a horse rider and driver. I worked for SmartPak for 16 plus years, formulating and doing research on supplements. I've been around the country presenting, like at Equine Fair and other horse expos like that. I do a lot of writing, and you may have seen my videos. I did a lot of Ask the Vet videos when I was at SmartPak. So people would send in a question, and then we'd cover 5 videos and we did that about once a month for umpteen years. So, and those are still out there in YouTube land somewhere.
I just have to tell you, Stephanie Williamson is on the webinar.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah. That's so cool. It's awesome. Yay.
What are the chances?
I know.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
This worked out great. So yeah, and so this webinar came into being because last week I was in Florida at a conference. It's the Kentucky Equine Research, or KER. They're a supplement company. They host, not every year, but every couple of years, an equine health and nutrition conference. And this year it drew people from 19 countries. There are about 200 people. It's sort of invitation only, and sort of, if you hear about it, you can sign up. It's kind of weird, but they had some of the biggest names in research, and it covered nutrition, it covered exercise physiology, and there were lots of strictly biochemistry talks. And being a biochemistry nerd, I was fascinated, but a lot of other people I could tell were like, what is he talking about? ATP who? So my goal with this is just to, of all the, there were 8 and 9, 17, of 21 talks, I'm just going to give like the key takeaway from each, like one key takeaway from each talk. So, sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So now I'm going to try to share my screen. And well, I don't actually see. Oh, that's Chrome tab. I don't see. I want to share entire screen and then see what happens. And then I'll go to my PowerPoint. So tell me if you can see it. What do you see, Wendy?
I see your webinar, but you're in edit mode.
I can do that. How about now?
Perfect.
All right. So this is what I learned at the 27th Equine Health and Nutrition Conference. The first thing I have to say is it was a swanky place. It was in Ocala, Florida, and it was at the Golden Ocala Golf and Equestrian Club. And I'm telling you, that place was like, woo-wee. It's about 5 minutes from WEC, the World Equestrian Center. So if you're familiar with that neck of the woods. So day 1 was Monday, February 5th, and there were 8 talks. The first one was, 8 o'clock, get right into it, exercise physiology. They spent probably 10 or 15 minutes talking about ATP. And I hadn't thought about ATP since 1986. So it was a good review, but it really had to search for brain cells. My key takeaways from their talk was that in performance horses, because that's what this whole thing was about, the sport horse, it's the respiratory system that's the limiting step. You can condition the heart, the muscles, the bones, the soft tissues, but you cannot condition, and by condition I mean improve fitness, the respiratory system. Their quote was, you can't train it, but you can keep it healthy. So the point was, don't let equine asthma syndrome or things like flu and rhino infections, don't let those take away from your horse's performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's We think of being able to condition the lungs, right? That's what we think about.
Yeah, I did too. And they said, nope, it is what it is. All you can do is maintain the health of it.
Adenosine triphosphate, ATP.
Yep. So the next one was this wonderful vet from Belgium, and her talk was called Field Performance Testing, and in English that means sport horses come to her because they are performing poorly or not to their expectations, and their regular vet has sort of tested everything that they know how to do, and they're stumped. So she's the world's expert in why isn't this horse performing as good as he used to. And then this list here is all the areas that she investigates when they come to her facility. So the theme of the whole 3 days was that a lot of things, like you might bring a horse to a vet and think there's a lameness or maybe neurological. She said most of the time it comes down to respiratory system and heart. She was finding a lot of heart and lung issues in horses that came to her for unsoundness. So this one I added a few slides because I really enjoyed it. Dr. Hilary Clayton was there, and her talk was dressage training and conditioning. And she always emphasizes when she talks about this topic, the difference between training and conditioning. And training is teaching the technical skills of the sport, how to transition from walk to trot on the bit, how to do a canter pirouette, things like that. Conditioning is building up the horse's fitness. After she covered that, she went to specializing in a sport versus being diversified, and that every horse should have a good foundation of training and fitness, and then once they're old enough, mature, then they can go into their sport and specialize. But it's good for their bodies and their minds to have to be diversified, which another word for that we're perhaps more familiar with, cross training. But I love this quote from her, and it goes along with the picture on the bottom right of my screen where it says propulsive muscles, that second horse in. A good dressage horse looks like it backed into a wall because of the tuck of the pelvis and the sitting, the bend in the hind legs and the carrying weight. And I'd never heard that before. Did you, Wendy?
I haven't heard that expression exactly, but I understand what she's saying.
Yeah, I really like that. After Hilary was Dr. Joe Pagan, and he's the owner and the founder of the KER, and he talked probably twice each day. And this time was how to feed horses to give them the energy they need to perform, and understanding that a racehorse needs different amount and type of energy than an endurance horse. And the key takeaway from his talk, I'm finding there's some people that don't like beet pulp, and I can't quite figure out why, but he called it a super fiber because it has 43% soluble fiber, and soluble fiber is highly digestible, and that provides horses with energy. The picture at the bottom, you'll notice they're all from Olympics. The KER, the company that hosted this event, it has been the official Olympic equine nutritionist since Atlanta.
Wow.
So that's pretty. They're well regarded in the field. This one I didn't get as much out of as the other ones, EIPH or bleeders. Just that just because one episode might be severe doesn't mean that in the future it's getting worse and worse. There doesn't seem to be a correlation. And then they went into the mode of action of furosemide, or Lasix is the brand name, and that actually has two actions. One is it serves as a diuretic, and so it simply lowers the blood volume in a horse because they think the blood pressure is one reason they bleed. And then he also talked about recently they think there's a receptor mode of action too, but got a little over my head. Then one of my favorite talks, one of my favorite people is Dr. Valberg. Yeah. And so her title was Equine Myopathies. The description was, or what she talked about was muscle disorders that impact performance. And so she had a kind of a flowchart thing going, and she started out saying, first of all, you have to figure out, are you seeing, is the performance being impacted because of muscle pain or muscle weakness? Like it hurts or I just can't do it. And then she said, from there, you keep going down the flow chart. And does it occur upon exertion, like with exercise, or outside of exercise? So like a horse ties up with exercise. That's an exertional muscle disorder. But HYPP can happen just standing in the stall. So that is a type of non-exertional muscle disorder. And then she really honed in on PSSM, and there's type 1 and type 2 versus the myofibrillar myopathy, which is they kind of put it in with PSSM2, not because it's like it, but because PSSM1, and then there's everything else. So she calls it that which is not PSSM1.
And just for people who have not watched Lydia's webinar on PSSM, please do so. It's an excellent talk and really helped me understand what this was all about in these different type 1 and type 2. So just.
Well, I thought I'd go ahead and spell out what that means, but PSSM stands for polysaccharide storage myopathy. And so myopathy means, myo means muscle, and path means pathology, disease. So equine myopathies means muscle disease. So polysaccharide storage myopathy, we know now we're talking about muscle disease. Polysaccharide is a large sugar. Poly means a lot, and saccharide, sugar. And then storage means when you eat and you either take in glucose or your body breaks sugars down to glucose, then it goes into the bloodstream, and the brain, the preferred food stuff of the brain is glucose. Muscle likes sugar also. It doesn't store it as glucose. That's the traveling version. When glucose is stored in muscle cells, it's stored as glycogen. So glycogen is the storage form of glucose, and glycogen is polysaccharide. That's kind of a long description of it.
No, that was really good.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, this guy was fabulous. If you ever get a chance to hear Dr. Ben Sykes, like if he ever gives a webinar or something, he's Australian. And he was funny. And his wife, his 2 daughters, and his son, they all ride horses. And the stories he told were just hilarious. So his big update was we had this thing about gastric ulcers. We called it EGUS, equine gastric ulcer syndrome. Well, now there's a consensus paper out, and they've divided up the top part of the stomach where the squamous cells are. The squamous cells are at the skin, like epithelial cells. And then that's the top. That's equine squamous gastric disease. And then the bottom is glandular, and they're the ones that produce all the acid and other inflammatory mediators and things. That's equine glandular gastric disease. And they're 2 completely separate gastric ulcer diseases now. And there's no association between the 2. So he called them the odd couple. And he actually showed a picture of, I can't think of their names, but
you know, Walter Matthau and.
Oh, I can see him. I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
And one of the key takeaways is that the top gastric ulcer disease, the squamous cell, 80% management, 20% horse as far as risk factors and causes. But when gastric ulcers happen in the bottom, it's no, I had that. I don't have that right.
Yeah. I was looking at that going, it's the same.
It's the same. It's 20% management and 80% horse. And it all comes down to stress. So the squamous gastric ulcers are this 3-factor effect I've got at the bottom. It's the hay, what you're feeding, what kind, when you're feeding, and there's a typo there, timing, and then too much non-structural carbohydrates or too much grain per meal, and then my stop sharing thing is on top of this, but exercise amount and timing, because one of the reasons that horses get ulcers in the top of their stomach is the simple act of trotting, cantering, or galloping, basically anything faster than a walk. If they don't have a bed of hay in their stomach to serve as sort of a mat, then the acid in the bottom, because horses are always releasing acid, it simply sloshes up to the top where it's not protected. The glandular region has some protection because it's the one making the acid. So it's like, I better put a layer here. But the bottom seems to be surprised. There's acid in the stomach? What? And so when it sloshes up there, it's basically a chemical burn.
So there's a little button that says hide. You can hide your screen share so that's, there we go.
Okay.
So you're saying that the squamous cell, the one on the top of the stomach, is really like acid splash.
That's one of the main reasons that horses get gastric ulcers in the top, yes.
And so then the bottom part you haven't talked about yet, but that's interesting because yes, if there's basically if you've ever been to a swamp and you find all the matted stuff, it keeps the squishy stuff down so you can walk over the top of it. So if there's enough matting, when the horse's movement, then it's not going to splash up to the
exactly.
squamous.
And he said because we know thoroughbred racehorses have this incredibly high gastric ulcer rate incidence. And he said one of the reasons is, you know how they gallop them in the morning.
Right.
They don't feed them hay before they gallop them. He said if they would just feed them hay, they would reduce it so much. The other thing, he told the story of this trainer, and it's 10 times better in an Australian accent. And
yeah, I know.
I'm not even gonna try, but he said he had this, the trainer's name was Tricky. He said, great name for a trainer, right? He kept having, his horses just were full of ulcers and they couldn't figure out, and they were, trying to work through it. And he said, well, what about your hay? And he said, oh, they have ad lib hay. I mean, they have hay. I think Ben was there, and every horse had a hay net hanging outside the stall. You know how they do on the shed row. And so Ben, Dr. Sykes, has now figured out he has to ask them not how much hay is in front of the horse, how much hay does the horse eat? He says, so hey, Tricky, how often do you replenish these hay nets? And he goes, once a week or so. Oh, well, they weren't eating the hay. So he had a slide said hay is not protective if the horses don't eat it. So this is why I recommend people journal, because you have to be your own detective sometime. And if you don't track things, you miss something glaringly obvious like that.
Well, so now, wait, before you leave that slide, the equine glandular, that's 80% horse and 20% management.
Correct.
So what is the cause of it if it's 80% horse?
Stress.
Simply stress.
Yeah, it's how that individual horse copes with stress.
Wow.
And that's why it's 80% horse, because it's all up here. And he showed some stuff about they've looked at different sounds, music in horses, and they found that they like classical music, they don't like country. And the worst kind of sound or radio for them is talk radio. They talk radio. What they measure was their salivary cortisol levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Their salivary cortisol shot up when they put talk radio on.
So So, okay, so here's my point then. If it's 80% horse and 20% management, isn't it really management because we're the ones creating the stress?
Yeah, sure, you could argue that, but he wanted to make a distinction between squamous gastric disease and glandular gastric disease, that the things we've been told about risk factors and management things we can do about turning out on pasture and not feeding too much grain at a meal, none of that will have an effect on glandular gastric disease.
Yeah, so Ellen, the slide is incorrect. It should read 80, the second one, equine glandular gastric disease is 80% horse and 20% management. Just a typo on Lydia's part, which is so rare.
I know. Can you tell I was in a hurry? Okay, so you notice this one looks a little bit different than the other ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's because I got tired of listening to talks, and I had friends there, and we went shopping at the tack shack at Ocala.
Did you get something nice?
Well, yeah, I got a new helmet.
Oh, that's right. And you got something with bling?
No, it is black matte. It couldn't be. It's like a superhero helmet disguise. Yeah.
And just full disclosure, the reason Lydia had to get a new helmet is that she did come off her horse and hit her head, and therefore her helmet needed to be replaced.
Yeah. So, all right. So day 2. These will look a little bit different too, because I simply ran out of time putting this together. I didn't realize I went to 21, make that 20 talks, and I took about 20 pages of notes. So
wow,
a lot of learning. But this exercise of now putting it in a PowerPoint and sharing it has been really good for me, because it made me go back and look at my notes. Okay, so Dr. Wendy Pearson is from Canada. I forget what institution, but they introduced her as the queen of nutraceuticals. So, and in this one, her slide, I wanted to show it to you, Wendy, but I didn't want to include it in my talk because I didn't want someone to take it out of context. But her conclusion slide was no pain, no gain. And I was like, oh, but her point was that you need some inflammation to be healthy, that there is a role of inflammation. It is not, it's been a bit demonized. Zero inflammation is not good either. Excessive inflammation is not good, but we have to have some, because if you don't, like if you're trying to condition a horse, if the tissues don't undergo some oxidative stress and generate free radicals, they're not going to improve with your work. So her point was antioxidants are good if there's a disease or condition that you're trying to help with, but they block the normal response to exercise, the adaptive response, and kind of undo the work that you're doing. So she said, don't err on the side of being too helpful.
Well, that is really fascinating, because as you say, inflammation has become enemy number one in all things. However, as soon as you say this, it makes sense, right? Where's the middle? You need some.
Where's the middle?
Responds, right? So it responds and does what it's supposed to do, build more muscle, stronger bone, all that. But
it can't do it if it's too protected. It's sort of like, don't be a helicopter mom to your horse. Over protection is not helping him. And then everybody's heard of leaky gut syndrome, right?
Yeah.
The thing that was interesting to me on this was more because I go around to the vet schools and I give talks to the veterinary students who unfortunately don't get much in the way of equine nutrition. And I'm going to add this part to my talk. The digestive system has 3 main roles. And I had forgotten to be telling the vet students one of these. And so obviously it absorbs nutrients and is a means to get them through the body. Okay. it removes waste. I mean, everybody poops is the book, right? And then the third one is it's a major part of the host defense system. I mean, what are they? 70% of the immune system is in the gut.
Right.
And then she said, and I think I'd heard this before, but the gut is the longest single interface between the inside and the outside, between the inside of the body and the outside world.
Wow.
I know, you just sit and go,
oh, yeah.
That's right. She's true. It's true. So in a nutshell, leaky gut syndrome is basically when molecules go between the cells in the GI tract, and they shouldn't. And then an immune response is launched that shouldn't be, or is bigger than it should be. So I thought she broke that down pretty good.
And did she say what we can do to mitigate leaky gut? Like, is there one major thing that everybody should be doing?
Well, she said the cause of it, the main causes were so the cells are together because of what's called tight junctions. So if this is a cell and this is a cell, there's a tight junction, and it's a protein, and it's a pore, it's a channel that can open upon a receptor being filled. It's like sometimes they're supposed to let things through, but there's other times when the tight junctions just fall apart, get leaky, and that's bad. And so she said exercise can make the tight junctions get leaky, stress, diet, and heat stress, I should say, is one of the biggest causes of leaky gut syndrome.
I would have never pegged heat.
Yeah. So a high sugar diet increases the permeability or leakiness. Like leaky is the good, like, normal English word, but the scientists all say permeability. So high sugar diets increase permeability. One thing that is more and more feeds are having this ingredient, butyrate. Butyrate, butyrate or butyric acid. It's a soluble. Horses make volatile fatty acids from it, and it is the preferred foodstuff of intestinal cells, and it has been shown to decrease the permeability.
So butyrate is actually a good thing.
It's a good thing. Yep.
But I'm sure all things in moderation.
Well, it doesn't taste very good or smell. It smells like dirty socks that have been holding cheese for a month. Yeah. So I don't think there'll be any issue of getting a horse to eat too much of it. The other thing she said increases permeability is bute, which big shock there.
Well, that's interesting because they both start with the same 3 letters.
Not really, because it's phenylbutazone, right?
Yeah.
So this mighty mitochondria, I got to show you. This was pretty much how the whole 3 days went. These were the kind of slides they showed. So you can see why after 8 talks, my brain just went, oh, I'm done. Boop.
Yeah. It's pretty heavy stuff.
It was pretty heavy, but it was interesting. The takeaway from the mighty mitochondria slide, easy for me to say, is that, how, and I think of this on like some treadmills, they give you the choice of what workout do you want to do, like anaerobic or aerobic or whatever. He says there's no switching from anaerobic to aerobic. It's not you're doing one or you're doing the other. All the time you're doing both. It's just what's the ratio? Are you 20-80? Are you 50-50? Are you 10-90? But never are you 100% aerobic or 100% anaerobic. So it's not a switch. It's just
it's a continuum.
It's a continuum. There you go. Thank you.
And so For people who don't know what mitochondria is, can you give us just a brief definition?
Yeah. It's the battery in the cell. It's, when we mentioned ATP at the beginning, and that got cut off on my little slide over there, the mitochondria make ATP, and ATP is what all the cells use in your body to do stuff. So it's like the currency of the body. I just made that up, but it's really
That's cool though.
Yeah. Yeah. So the more ATP you have, the more you get to it's the little horses they used to have at the grocery stores. You put in a quarter and it okay. So the more you can think of the quarter as the ATP, and the more you put in, the more the horse goes. And then when you run out of ATP, womp womp, the horse stops. So
and mitochondria actually, if I remember my cell biology, is actually something that was kind of by itself, and it's been absorbed into cells. In other words, it's kind of like its own little unit inside of a cell.
It is. Yeah, it was really interesting, the stuff they were saying about it. Like almost like it's an alien from another planet and they absorbed. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. And is there any way to increase the mitochondria in your cells, or is that just a fixed number?
I don't know that they talked about that, so I'm not going to hazard a guess.
But we can increase the metabolic function of the mitochondria.
Well, yes. Whenever the mitochondria are making ATP, they're producing, well, I'll go back to that. Can you see my cursor?
Not yet, but I bet you we can. Yeah. Now we can.
Okay. See this ROS, this big red thing?
Yep.
That stands for reactive oxygen species, or free radicals, oxidative stress. So when all this is happening, remember the Krebs cycle?
Yeah.
The mitochondria generate a lot of reactive oxygen species. So if you can, that's where Dr. Wendy Pearson's talk comes into play. Finding the balance, where's the middle, of giving horses that are exercising some antioxidants, but not too much, because these reactive oxygen species are going out in the body and doing damage, and that's part of why you get tired and sore when you work out. And so if we could limit those being released from the mitochondria, that would improve performance. Like, who's got a bunch of reactive oxygen species today?
No.
All the Kansas City Chiefs and the San
Francisco.
Oh my God.
Those football players.
They're hurting today. So that's one way to make your mitochondria work better, is to keep down the reactive oxygen species that they're spitting out. And the other is to provide them with the right fuel for the kind of work, fast or slow, and how long. So that's why they kept going. I mean, think of the work that a barrel racer does. What is that? 17 seconds of like max gallop,
right?
Versus an Arab doing 100 miles. So you need very different fuel sources and conditioning to get your mitochondria to have the right fuel at the right time, and for it to carry you on for as long as you need. It's really, fascinating stuff.
So basically then you've got these little alien mitochondria that are in your cells. They're the ones that are making the ATP, the energy that runs everything, currency. But as a result of making currency, there's this waste product, which is the oxidative stress that everybody's trying to get rid of by giving them anti-inflammatories, antioxidants. But if we knock the oxidative process down too far, we don't get the benefit of the exercise we just did. So we have to have some stress, but not too much.
That's it exactly.
Okay.
That's it exactly. Okay. So Dr. Stephanie Valberg talked again about cutting edge technologies, and it was so cutting edge that I'm like, who now? But she talked about omics. OMICE, like every word had omics after it, like metabolomics, transcriptomics. It was quite difficult to follow. What I took out of it was that horses as a species, as a unique species, they're very slow to replace the glycogen fuel storage form of glucose in their muscles. It takes 3 days, where like people can replace it in 1 day. So her being the muscle expert, she's like, for me, the rate limiting step of performance, like what keeps horses from breaking the record for, running the Derby is the amount of glycogen that they can store in their muscles. Because once it's gone, then you're like, I have no more fuel. So, and she's using DNA and other cutting edge technologies to figure out if they can alter that, influence it at all.
So, okay, so let me see if I got this straight.
Good, because I don't, but let's hear it.
Okay. Horses store glycogen in their muscles. That's stored fuel.
Mm-hmm.
ATP hasn't touched it. Mitochondria hasn't touched it yet.
No, that glycogen is going to go to the mitochondria when the body needs it and get all those reactions happen. ROS spit out and ATP spit out.
Okay, great. So it's like storage system, like gas in my tank. My car's not driving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if I do a really fast, hard drive, I burn up all that fuel and my tank's going to be empty for 3 days.
Yeah. It's like, when you go to a gas station and you fill up, and sometimes it takes forever to fill up.
Oh, yeah, because the pump's really slow. Yep.
They're like, are they out of gas? What is the problem? So humans are like when you go to a gas station and it fills super fast. And horses are like when you go to the gas station and you're staying there for 15 minutes just to put 10 gallons in because it just won't go.
So that's really interesting in terms of training and conditioning, because if you do a hard workout, which, when you look at I forgot the name, a progressive training system,
like interval training.
Thank you. You have to space out your hard workout so that you have enough time to recover, because otherwise you can't do it again. Because
the adaptation to bring your horse to the next level happens in recovery, not the actual work.
Right.
A lot of people don't understand that concept.
So what that means is that if I'm going to condition my horse, and especially, let me put it this way, if he's unfit and has not been sort of conditioning his whole system to store and release energy, I have to be super careful so that I don't overwork him and make him really sore and not an empty tank. And then I'm wondering why I have an empty tank for a few days. It's because I overdid it.
Well, and so you kind of have the same, you can cause the same problem. There's overtraining, like training too hard, but the horse that's fit, but you keep on. And then the horse that's completely unfit and you're starting, but you work too hard. You can put the horse in a catabolic position, whereas meaning that the more you work him, the more he's losing muscle because you're not giving him time to recover or enough fuel to recover, enough days. So for horses, they've got to have days in between. You can't work, 6-7 days a week. And when Stephanie talked about PSSM and MFM, she said one of these horses, and I would have to go back and look to see, needs 2 days on and 3 days off, and one needs like 2 days on and 3 days off.
So this idea of working your horse every day is not necessarily a good idea, because if you burn up all your glycogen, you're not going to have any gas in the tank.
Right. Yeah, the only way you can do it is if you do different stuff. So you could go out for a hack on one day and walk. You hardly can go wrong with walking. Walking is always good. But if you're going to do work, faster gaits, jumping, barrels, working cows, whatever your thing is, that's what you shouldn't do 2 days in a row, because it's just like I did arm day today. I'm not going to do arm day tomorrow because my muscles need, the whole point is to get them big and strong. And tomorrow is the day that they adapt and recover. Plus they're going to be sore tomorrow. So tomorrow is leg day.
So this gets back to Dr. Clayton's talk about cross training and doing different things so that you're working different muscle groups, or resting, or working more on training versus conditioning.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, cool. And so what we try to do with my horse is we do a training day, and the other thing, she didn't say it in this talk, but she said it in other talks. Like I just said, you can walk every day, and you should, no matter what you're going to do later. Maybe you're only going to walk, great. Maybe you're going to work. You still need to have like a 10-minute walk at the beginning. But she also said you can always do suppling. Suppling you should do every day also. So walking every day, suppling every day. The other things, maybe that's all you do on an easy day. Maybe you have a work day, but you still walk and supple.
Okay.
So we talked about carbohydrates and glucose and glycogen. Dr. Pagan then gave a lecture on fatty acids. And we've known for, 40, 50 years now that horses are really good at using fat as fuel. And they can absorb it with like a 96% efficiency. So it's a really good source of fuel. But you want to pay careful attention to what kind of fat you're giving them. So we know that the omega-6 fatty acids are the precursors of the inflammatory pathways, the inflammatory mediators, while the omega-3 fatty acids are the precursors of the anti-inflammatory. So corn oil is 57-to-1 ratio, omega-6 to omega-3. So we've hopefully all gotten away from feeding corn oil because it's incredibly inflammatory. Flaxseed is higher in 3s to 6s. Canola is better than corn, but not great. Chia seed's actually better than flaxseed. Fish oil, and now algal sources are excellent. They're the gold standard. But that was the important thing from that one. And then the whole rest of the afternoon was about heat stress and sweating and electrolytes and really, really cool stuff. Let me find those notes. I think I must have written down every word this guy said. So the four ways to dissipate heat, right?
Go ahead and tell everybody.
Radiation, conduction, convection, evaporation. What species utilize sweating as their main method of cooling?
Humans
and horses, monkeys, and he didn't say this, but I found this in my research, bats.
Okay.
Yeah. And dogs have sweat glands in the pads of their feet. That's the only place.
They're not good at dissipate that, they got to pant.
Well, they're very good at panting.
Yeah.
He did it. His thing was a comparative approach. And so he compared dogs to horses, and actually dogs are pretty darn good at getting rid of heat. When horses pant, they're not very good at it, and by the time they get to panting, it's pretty bad.
Right.
I think I have a yeah. So it's impossible to cool a hot horse too fast, and I cannot emphasize that enough, because in the past it was thought that putting cold water on a horse would cause them to tie up. That's been proven wrong a bajillion times.
That was actually the thing that came out of the Atlanta Olympics, because it was in summer. They did a huge amount of heat studies on how to cool horses, came up with misters and all, but that's where I remember that research starting to come out, that you can't cool a horse too fast.
Fun fact, I helped do some of that research in 94 or 95 it was the 96 Olympics, right?
Yeah.
So we did it at Carl Buchart's farm in, I can't think of the name, Alpharetta, Georgia.
And this is where, you see people and the horse is exercised and he's hot and they throw a cooler on him, which just holds in the heat. So he's trying to dissipate heat. They don't want him to get a chill, but at the same time, he needs to get rid of that excess heat. And they put a cooler on him so he can't.
Worst thing you can do. Air movement is incredibly important. They talked about, they did experiments where they cross-tied the horse in a stall and just left him. They did putting ice and cold water on them, and then they walked them. They did ones where they walked them and then put cold water on them. They have a thing at their research farm. It's one of those mechanical walkers, Yep. And they have built into it the mists. So they walk. The whole thing is just a big mister.
Right.
And the research is really fascinating on it.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? I forgot. Anyway, onward.
But my point is, don't be afraid to cool your horse, and the water can go anywhere on the whole body. I mean, use ice. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, and especially, like with the heat they had in Texas and stuff, and the horses couldn't cool down because at night the temperature didn't drop low enough.
Which is a great segue to anhydrosis. The horses that have this condition, which is they lack the ability to sweat, their primary cooling mechanism has failed. And those horses, that can be fatal to a horse. If they're in a place like Texas or Florida or the hot states, and like you say, at night when it doesn't cool down. So the long term, and anhydrosis does tend to get worse as it goes on. In the long term, the best thing you can do for those horses, and I'm not joking, is move to a cooler environment.
Yeah, it's really tough.
And I know some people have actually put their horses in air conditioning.
Yeah.
So, but that's a tough disease. They're working on it. They're finding out things, but
no solutions yet, really.
Yeah. Oh, this one was supposed to be. So now we're on new methods for studying exercise-induced heat stress in horses. And the really cool thing is here that I thought that rectal thermometers were like accurate.
Oh, yeah. No?
Yeah, not so much. He said all you're doing is measuring the temperature of the inside of the rectum or the lining. If you've got it against the wall, that's what you're measuring. He said you're not really getting the core temperature, core body temperature. So they have the new technology he's talking about here is this Biothermo is the brand. It's a microchip, and they put it for the study. They put it in the pectoral muscle and one of the middle gluteal muscle, and then they put the horses on the treadmill and ran them on a standard exercise test, or SET, and they have a wand that reads the chip.
Yeah.
And it would read not only the chip, the number, but also the temperature. And it was oh, I want to say it was almost 3 degrees different. Let me see if I've got it here. No,
But, okay, so let me just kind of play devil's advocate here. For the average person who does not have a way to microchip and test their horse, using a rectal thermometer is still a really good way to have a baseline of your horse's temperature. And if you see a fluctuation of 3 degrees, call your vet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing I've got away from this is the biothermal microchip is never going to be in use, right, with the average person. So the reference range that we have for rectal temperature is still accurate. We know that a rectal temperature 99.5 to 100.5 is normal range for the horse. If it's above 100.5, it's abnormal. Let's call your vet. That may not, while that may not be the core temperature of the horse, we have established the reference range for rectal temperatures, and so we know for that value. It's kind of like doing a weight tape on a horse. The weight tape that goes around their heart girth might not be accurate, but if the same person does it the same way every time, and the same tension in the same place on the horse, it's the trend that's important.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I did want to say about temperatures is after the horse stops exercising and you're in the cooling out phase, their core temperature continues to climb.
Oh, yes, that makes sense, actually. I mean, people know that from when they stop moving and then they're still.
You get hotter. You get hotter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last one for that day is electrolytes and hydration. So the 3 main electrolytes for horses, because they're in sweat, is sodium, like majority, and then potassium and chloride. Horses, you know how horses, their sweat is lathery? It's like white and foamy. That they have a protein in their sweat that other species don't, called latherin. Super fun. Let's see. And then, do we have time for one more day? I'm not hearing anything from you, Wendy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Pull this up again from beginning. Okay. Oh, going through this really fast. Just a quick reminder, everything. So the last day, thank God, because about at this point, I am like, my brain is full. We did that. Wednesday was just a half a day. And the first one was a topic near and dear to my heart. That was Dr. Wendy Pearson again, talking about the role of nutraceuticals in equine nutrition. She was I was a little bit disappointed because she was a little bit poo-pooing them.
Can you define nutraceutical for people, please?
Well, so there's hay and pasture, and then there's commercial feeds like grains, ration balancers, complete feeds like Equine Senior is a complete feed, and then nutraceuticals. I mean, the term came from nutrition and pharmaceutical, right? But
okay,
only veterinarians use the term nutraceutical. They're supplements.
Oh,
so yeah. So joint supplements and hoof supplements and skin and coat. So I don't know why veterinarians persist in this nutraceuticals, but
we all call them in the lay world supplements.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. She said that almost 80% of horse owners are adding supplements to their horse's diet. She was heavy on the research side of it. She's like, if you're gonna give supplements, then give ones that have the company does research. So the host of this event, Kentucky Equine Research. The research is in the name. If you have ever heard about the research in garlic in horses,
I have not. I know about garlic, but I haven't.
So garlic, for a while there, people were afraid to give it because somebody, I forget who, pointed out that, hey, garlic causes a specific kind of anemia in mammals. It's called a Heinz body hemolytic anemia. And then everyone's like, oh my God, we got to stop giving garlic. Well, Wendy Pearson, for her master's thesis way back in the 80s, she's the one that did the research that said for a horse to develop this hemolytic anemia from garlic, they have to eat like 5 cups of it
a day.
So she's like, while it is possible, it's extremely unlikely because nobody feeds that much and horses can't eat that much. So I mean, she is knowledgeable about supplements. And yeah, she's really heavy on the research, which is not a bad thing. And then we went to that Ben Sykes guy again. And he had even funnier stories this day. One interesting thing he said was sometimes horse owners will push back on you if you give them management suggestions that make their life hard, like give your horse ad lib hay. And they're like, oh, I can't possibly do that. That's just, I can't, there's no way. And so he'll say, well, could you feed hay maybe 3 times a day if you're only feeding twice, or 4 times a day? What if you toss a flake of hay out for lunch and maybe toss another flake out at night check? Oh, I can do that. So he says sometimes it's all in how you present it to get them to do helpful things. A lot of people feed, and I feed out of a hay net. He said if you can slow horses' intake down if you put multiple hay nets in their stall or paddock, because they will graze the hay nets like they graze. They'll move from one hay net to the other. And I hadn't heard that before. I'll believe it, but this one was fun because all these people got up and said that there's no science behind these tests, and don't spend your money on these. And allergy is one that I have harped on for years. If you think your horse has a food allergy, which is extremely rare, by the way,
but possible,
not even sure it's been documented.
I have a client whose horse had an allergy, and the previous owner kept trying to feed her the same thing, and she wouldn't eat her food. And when they finally realized I've forgotten what she was allergic to, and they changed her feed, she's fine.
And that might be a food sensitivity or food intolerance.
But okay, now what's the difference?
Well, to be an allergy, it would have to be an allergen that gets into the body, and the body's immune system with T cells and B cells recognize it as not self and sets up, launches or mounts an immune response to it, versus a food intolerance or sensitivity could be like, I don't care for spicy food and my body lets me know after I eat it.
Okay, so it's the difference is whether or not the immune system sets up a response,
a whole body response. Yeah, like hives. If you eat something and you break out in hives, then that's a food allergy, but that's extremely uncommon to rare in horses. And what some of these companies are doing is they're saying, oh, your horse has hives, send in blood and we'll tell you what he's allergic to. Food allergies are not diagnosable with a blood test. That's the point of this. If you think your horse has a food allergy, you have to do a dietary elimination trial, food trial. And dog owners will be familiar with this. We because dogs get food allergies and they do dietary elimination trials all the time. It's less common in horses, but it does. There are horses. I mean, it does happen. But you can't. The point is, you can't diagnose a food allergy with a blood test. So when they come back with, oh, your horse is allergic to 27 things, oats, corn, pine trees, cotton, this, that, and the other, those tests have not been validated.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So now, blood and hair. Let's just talk about blood and hair for a moment.
Yeah.
Or blood. Since the blood is going to try and keep everything's normalized, it may not show what's going on. Is that
That's excellent. That's an excellent way of describing it, because their point here was, can these tests tell you if you're feeding your horse the right thing? And the answer is no. Blood tests, the guy said, they're to tell you if your horse has a disease or not. Like, if you measure red blood cells and they're low, then your horse is anemic. If you measure white blood cells, hang on one second. I think there's somebody here, Todd. Can you get that? Our doorbell never rings. If the white blood cells are, what did I say, low, high, whichever, not in the normal range, then your horse might have a disease. But he said, except for vitamin E and selenium, testing blood is not going to tell you anything about your vitamins and minerals and that, because your body is designed to find the middle, homeostasis, and it will pull vitamins and minerals from bones or muscle or wherever to make the blood be perfect.
Okay. Hair.
So hair mineral analysis, they also said, was not accurate, and I didn't know this. It is illegal in New York to do hair mineral analysis.
So the only thing I'm going to say there is that I did a hair analysis on my horse who has overload of heavy metals, which showed up in his hair. And through detox, giving him detox, we can see those numbers come down year over year. So
I know, and I know I've said that. I know there's people who strongly believe in it.
But heavy metals might be different. I'm not looking at minerals or nutrition.
Yeah.
I'm looking at basically lead, cadmium, and mercury. Yeah. So elements, really. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I can say is the change in the horse.
Yeah.
Done this is proof. As Martha Faraday says, the proof is in the pony.
Right. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. The last one was genetic testing, and Dr. Valberg did that one. There is a company out there that claims it has a test for PSSM2, but it's not ever been validated. And she's like, I mean, if Dr. Valberg can't find a test for it, then nobody can.
Right.
So she's like, the only way to diagnose PSSM type 2 and myofibrillar myopathy is with a muscle biopsy. Can't do it with blood or hair.
But you can find type 1 with genetic testing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Her lab identified the place on the muscle, on the horse's genome, where the mutation occurs in the DNA.
Okay.
For PSSM type 1.
So the bottom line here is that doing a blood analysis is valid if you're looking for diseases, not nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It's not necessarily allergies, but food sensitivity.
Right.
And genetic testing can only work if there is a genetic marker to look for, which
correct.
In cases there aren't. And hair analysis for nutrition it's
just not the preferred method. It's not accurate for.
Okay, so that leads me to this question: how do we assess our horse's nutritional health?
Let me figure out how to turn share screen off. So Dr. Eleanor Kellen said this the best way, and it is done by ration analysis. So you know what you use the NRC, nutrient requirements of horses, to find out what your horse needs every day based on his workload and his age and other factors like pregnant mares, yearlings, whatever. They have different needs, and then you feed them that, and it means you may need to have your hay analyzed or whatever. I mean, there are companies out there that you analyze your hay and you send them the analysis, and they will make you a custom blend.
So given that hay should be the bulk of a horse's diet, that makes a lot of sense that the feed is really a minor part of the diet. Right. Is there any value, just out of curiosity, in, okay, if this is what I'm putting in, and then can we analyze the poop and see what's, in other words, am I feeding stuff that's coming out in the poop and the horse isn't using it?
No.
But wouldn't that be nice? Because what if I'm, feeding all this stuff and it's coming out in the poop, and so I'm spending all this money on what I think is good nutrition and it ain't.
I mean, you like electrolytes. They are extra electrolytes that you don't need are urinated out. So you could I mean, and that's one test. If you want to look at your horse's electrolytes in the blood, you do what's called a fractional clearance. And that is you draw blood and you take a urine sample and you compare the two. Oh. And that way you can figure out if your horse is on the right track. But
so I guess the reason I bring up this question is how many people are spending an awful lot of money on supplements that is not doing the horse any benefit?
I think probably a lot, only because in my experience at SmartPak, humans have this thing about more is better. Mm-hmm. And I would find people that were giving twice of the same category of supplement.
Oh,
and that's not necessary. And then like my horse has incredible feet. I'm not giving him a hoof supplement because he doesn't need biotin and everything else. Biotin is a B vitamin. B vitamins are water soluble. He would just pee it out. But I don't feed it to him because he doesn't need it. But I bet there's a lot of people out there. On the one hand, it's insurance, right?
As long as it's water soluble.
Well,
cannot you overdo, like in humans, fat soluble vitamins because you're going to store them and have too much?
Vitamin E is a fat soluble vitamin. There has never been a case of vitamin E toxicity in horses. Okay. So some of the stuff we've been taught is not the full story. They just assumed we were idiots.
We're also not taught that horses store vitamin E if they can get to grass. Right? So if they eat grass in the fall, they can store vitamin E to go through the winter where there's not so much grass.
Oh, wait, I don't know if I agree with that. No. I don't think I would agree with that. Vitamin E is something you need every day to eat. It's dietary essential.
So how does a horse in the wild get vitamin E in the winter with no grass?
Well, they're still eating grass that's on the ground.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't have to be green, like growing. There is vitamin E in grass.
Right. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, that's okay.
I mean, less,
but still there.
Yeah. And there's vitamin E in hay. There's just less.
Okay.
Than if it's grass. Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah. And so vitamin E is one of those things that if you have an exercising horse, I think you should probably be supplementing it because there's more and more vitamin E responsive muscle and let's go with neuromuscular disorders being discovered like every day. Vitamin E responsive neuromuscular disorders. Let's just put more words together. And there's no harm in it. And so better safe than sorry. But something like selenium, there is a smaller window of, but it's not as small as they'd have you believe. So you could give your horse 1 milligram a day is what's recommended. 3 milligrams is even more beneficial. 5 is probably the upper limit.
Right. So, okay. So the bottom line is you got to go and read all the labels on the things you're feeding your horse. Know what the nutritional, what's the nutrition chart for horses?
The NRC, the nutrient requirements of horses. Right.
To figure out if you really need, and you have to look at the horse.
Yeah. Yep. Or you can work with an equine nutritionist if you're concerned. 70% of horse owners talk to the veterinarian about nutrition, which is fine, except that they may not be the best resource.
Right. And I think it seems to me that there are more people recognizing equine nutrition, like people who are trained equine nutritionists. Mm-hmm. I've interviewed a couple, and to just feel that they're, because it's hard to be able to read and analyze all those labels and know what's needed. And so that's a good investment to have someone look at what you're feeding, do the analysis, and have them review it with you so that you can ensure that your horse is getting everything he needs.
Mm-hmm. Were you keeping an eye on the questions? Do we need to go through them?
Yep, the only one is somebody's asking if there's types of vitamin E that are better than others.
Natural vitamin E, which is the D form. So look not in the GA probably, but the ingredients. It will say like D alpha tocopherol, and then that's the natural form, and it's more bioavailable.
Yep. And somebody said food sensitivities can still kill you. It just takes a lot longer.
Yeah, it's not funny. It's not funny, but
not funny, funny. And no, people really appreciate it. And someone asked, how do they enter the Surefoot giveaway for $500 coupon if you own Surefoot pads? Just go to Surefoot Equine on Facebook or Murdoch Method. No, I think Murdoch Method directs you over to Surefoot Equine. If you're a fan, there should be a post there. There's a link. Just click on that link, fill out the survey. It'll take you to Social Juice to do a testimonial, and you're in. And you could win a coupon worth $500. And we'll draw it the same way with our special little Wheel of Fortune. So awesome. Well, Lydia, thank you so much for going to the conference, and B, coming back and sharing your knowledge and information.
Yeah, it was such a hardship going to Florida for 3 days.
Yeah, but this is great because, it's something that, you put up that slide and we're like, what? That you have the experience and knowledge and understanding to be able to take that and bring it back to us lay people to be able to benefit from that information, because I think a lot of times there's a big gap between what's happening over here in the science world and what's happening here in every day.
Yeah, how would this information get to people?
Right. And that's one of the purposes of all these webinars is to be bridging that gap of bringing people that you wouldn't normally hear about or hear from, and bringing it out to the everyday horse owner so that they can make wise decisions for their horses. So that's really, I get it. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. The drawing for the $500 giveaway will be on February 26th. It will be just before Dr. Latcher's webinar on, I just forgot the title.
Whatever she's talking about, I'm in.
Yeah, Dr. Latcher is great. It's different kinds of therapies. What's the word for it?
Modalities?
No. Anyway, we'll put out an email.
Okay.
So, all right. So next week we have it on Monday as well. So we'll see you all later. And congratulations again to our winner of the Surefoot Pad contest. I think that was so awesome. That was Stephanie Williamson. And we'll be in touch with you to get your products out to you.